worship this morning? Well, I hope so, because we're going to start anyway. So I hope you're ready to worship with us, and we're going to do that with a song like we often do. We're going to start with Open the Eyes of My Heart. If you want to stand and join us, we'll begin our service.
Open the eyes. so glad to have you here with us today. And even as I share a couple thoughts, you can take the notebooks located on the outsides of the pew. It's summertime, and so we have a lot of people that are all over the world, literally, today. But that's okay. Glad to have you here with us. And I know most of you probably came in by cruise boat. It's raining a little bit. If you were like me and you came in a little bit earlier, and unlike me, if you haven't looked out the window, don't look. It's pretty bad. It's raining hard out there. But you made it and you didn't melt, so thank you for being here. A couple things that I want to bring up. One, many of you know that on Thursday, Mike Ramsire's father passed away, went to be with the Lord. And so today, they're going to be doing the calling hours. These will be at Alville Gilman's in town here. So it's from 2 to 4 and 6 to 8 today. So if you want to go encourage them, that's good. If you can't make that today, tomorrow morning there is a calling hour, but that's at the church, the Apostolic Church, and it's from 9:30 to 10:15 because the service starts at 10:30. So I know you'll want to be at least praying for Mike and his family, as it's been a pretty long week for them, a pretty tough week. Here, pardon me, it's the Smithville Smithville Apostolic Church. Oh, thank you, because I would have sent you the wrong one. So I didn't catch that detail, but it's in Smithville tomorrow. So that's 9:30 for the calling, 45 minutes, and then the service at 10:30 in Smithville. Next week will be our Vacation Bible School starts, next Sunday night. That's really exciting. We usually have some pretty great ones. It's on the theme of a treasure hunt, so there's adventure and excitement to it. All those are going to be in the evening, Sunday through Wednesday, from 6 to 8 in the evening. There is a sign-up sheet out in the lobby, so if you were able to just help provide a couple little things for us, take a look out there and you can sign it up, and you can even have them here next Sunday if you like. But lots of ways you can help out. If nothing else, you can invite young people to come, mostly elementary age kids, or you can be praying for it. That's really great too, to do that. So today is Father's Day, and that's a great occasion. And we're thankful. You know, most of you in this room, I was thinking about this, most people in this room have probably had pretty good experiences with their father, most of us. You know, you're very thankful for them. They were present most of the time, or when they could be, and that's a pretty neat thing too. All of us have had fathers who are imperfect. All of us have. There's shortcomings, everybody does. We've all sinned, come short of the glory of God. We've all disappointed each other at times, and yet God can even use those things in our lives. Part of the role of a father is to be present, to be over the discipleship of the children. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, there's a great passage, and in verse 6, it tells us how we're supposed to do that, or when we're supposed to do that. If you get to Deuteronomy 6:6, it tells us that you're to speak about the things God has asked us to know and to do, and you speak about it when you're sitting in your home, or when you're out walking on the way, or when you're lying down to go to sleep. And the impression that I get from that is all the time. Every moment is a teaching moment in the life of a family. And that's our responsibility, is to communicate God and God's truth to our young people. So today, be very thankful for those who have poured into your lives. They are imperfect, but the great news is when you know Christ, you have a perfect Heavenly Father who does love you and never leaves you. He's always present, and He's always there to minister to you and encourage you. So that's who we're here to worship, our Lord Jesus, and to enjoy all the great things that we have in Him together. So we're going to continue to do that.
If you want to stand with us again and turn in your hymnals to hymn number 279, Faith of Our Father.
Faith of our Father, saving
chapter 4, verses 1 through 9. It's page 451 in your hymn Bible if you're going there. If you're scrolling, you've probably got it by now. So, all right. Listen, my sons, to a father's instruction. Pay attention and gain understanding. I give you sound learning, so do not forsake my teaching. When I was a boy in my father's house, still tender, and an only child of my mother, he taught me and said, lay hold of my words with all your heart. Keep my commands, and you will live. Get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget my words or swerve from them. Do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. Love her, and she will watch over you. Wisdom is supreme, therefore get wisdom. Though it cost all you have, get understanding. Esteem her, and she will exalt you. Embrace her, and she will honor you. She will set a garland of grace on your head and present you with a crown of splendor.
We'll have our ushers come. Let's join together in prayer, please. Father, thank you so much for the instructions that you give to us from your word. We just read what Solomon wrote to his son, telling him how vital it is to cling to the teachings and the practices of knowing God. Thank you for those instructions, for those reminders. Thank you for those who have impressed that upon our hearts and impacted our lives with testimonies and faithfulness and love. Thank you so much for the gifts of people that you give to us. And they are very special. They help us in many, many ways, and they represent you in our lives. Lord, today we're here to honor, above anything else, our Savior Jesus. And we pray that as our hearts are open to him and to his word, that we would be able to exalt him above anything else that we know. Thank you so much for your grace, your love, your mercy. You are only and the only one able to receive the worship of worthiness for what you have done for us. We praise you and lift you up through our Savior Jesus. Amen.
All right, if you want to turn in your hymnals to hymn number 573, God of our Father.
It's
Also want to say thank you to Nancy Schiffer and her crew for taking care of the fathers today. And I heard she had really sound advice that what fathers really want is candy, chocolate, and stuff. So I was tempted to bring mine in here and just take a snack break halfway through, but I'm going to try to avoid that. So we're looking in the book, in the Old Testament. We're in 2 Chronicles 15 today, but we're looking at some of the different kings of Israel, trying to learn some good lessons from them. One of the things that we know for sure, we don't have to read the Bible even to know this, but sometimes the truth can be very, very dangerous. Witness the gentleman whose wife asked him, "Does this dress make me look fat?" And I hear, that robot going, "Warning, warning, warning." It's a tough one. "Does this dress make me look fat?" I'm not sure if he answered it right. He said, "No, the dress is fine. Don't blame the dress." Not a good answer. There is no good answer. Devin is a young man and he's learned that in life. That is so amazing. Thank you, Devin. Lots of dangerous questions in life, aren't there? And we know that. We see things all the time, and you're confronted with things from time to time, and you wonder, what should I do with this? How do I handle this? In the Old Testament, the prophets had a horrific assignment, a very difficult assignment, because their job was to speak God's truth, no matter what it cost, no matter what it did to them or what it did to the hearer. That was what they were supposed to do. That was, in their case, an extremely dangerous job, because often they would anger the king, and that could cost them their lives. And that's pretty scary. There are other times, which are kind of rare, we're going to see one today, when they did speak the truth to the king, and the king actually listened and heeded what they did and obeyed what was said. I wonder, how do you handle confrontation when it comes? Man, isn't that terrible? There are some people who love confrontation, but they needed to be spanked a little bit more. But anyhow, it's difficult. Most of us have trouble with that. And some of the extremes of what people do is when they're in a confrontation, fear takes over and they shut down and they stop. They're just not going to do anything. They're not going to say anything. They're passive in that. Or you can go to the other extreme where there's a confrontation and just out of control, you just blurt out what you're thinking, no matter how painful that's going to be to somebody else. I'm going to suggest that those two extremes are probably not what the goal for you and I should be. More likely, we should do what Scriptures tells us, where it says we should speak the truth in love. The real key there is in love. We need to be able to communicate what God has in our hearts and do it in a way that's very, very caring. I'm sure you're like that. I think I am sometimes. I can receive criticism better from somebody who I know is doing it because they care and they're doing it for your own good, as opposed to the guy who's just taking a crack at you. So speaking the truth in love is really important. So we come to 2 Chronicles 15. Israel is in a really, really bad place at this time. And King Asa is going to hear a message, and it's going to be really critical that he listens to this, because they're in a path where it can go bad, or it can get worse than it has been, or it can maybe change for good. Verse 1 says this: "The Spirit of God came upon Azariah, son of Obed." Okay, that just needs a little bit of clarification. Azariah is the present-day prophet of Israel at that time. He's really significant. There's about 20 different people in the Old Testament named Azariah. I'm guessing you don't know too many by that name, but there were about 20 of them. And this is the only place that we know is reference to this prophet. And the only reason why we know that is because it identifies, not only is his name Azariah, but he's the son of Obed. And that's the only place that we know of him appearing. The name Azariah, and I even wonder, is it a name or is it a title? But it means that you're helped by Jehovah. Somehow he's helped by Jehovah. It could be that God helps him to communicate truth. I think so. Or it could mean that God helps him by protecting him when he does communicate truth. I think that's true too. I wonder if it's a combination of both in his case. Well, here's Azariah, the prophet of God, and the Spirit is sending him to speak to the king of Judah, the southern two tribes, and he's going to communicate truth. That's so vitally important. Some of you know there was an old preacher a while back, J. Vernon McGee. He used to be on the radio every day, and he was good. I liked him. He was crusty and a little bit uncouth at times, but he was pretty good. But here's something he wrote back in 1976. 1976. You may remember, some of you read about that in history, that there was a year once called that. Here's what he said. The tragedy of the hour in our day is that there's not enough Bible teaching in the church. ... He later said, we do not need more preachers. You can buy them like bananas by the dozen. Bible teachers are few and far between, yet they are so needed. I think he's right. I'm sure King Asa had a lot of people who would tell him what he needed to know and think, and some of them were probably pretty slick and really good, and maybe even very charismatic and very enticing in how they presented things. But what he needed to know was the truth. Just simply know the truth and obey it. There was a real need for that in Asa's day. Let's go to the setting a little bit of what was going on in Israel and Judah, especially at that time. Asa is now probably second or third, depends on how you number him, king for Judah. Solomon, of course, was the one who built the temple. Then his son Rehoboam came along and split the kingdom up. We looked at that last week, where 10 of the tribes up north went together. Eventually Jeroboam was the leader of that for a while. And Rehoboam was over the two tribes of Judah and Benjamin in the south. Asa now has risen up to be the king. And he is in a line of about a dozen kings that are going to be over Judah in their history. He's the first one that the scripture says really good things about him. For instance, okay, I think I'm getting this, but maybe I'm not. So, okay, sorry about that. It's just, there you go. Once again, Andrew did a great job of getting a picture of Asa for us. I don't know, am I coming up or not? So I'm afraid we're going to have to use you. Thank you. So verse 1 is God's word through the prophets, and let's see the verses that come under it. There's one of them. And it says this in 1 Kings 15:11, Asa did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. And then the next one in 2 Chronicles said that Asa did what was good and right in the eyes of the Lord. You get the impression that he's a good dude. He did okay. He did the right things. God liked him. And he did very, very well. And we can take that off now. But Asa sought God. He went after God. He looked for him. And there was a situation when a king of the Cushites, his name was Zerah, and he was out of the Sudan region. And then he came, and Asa didn't know what to do. And so he formed an army of people, but he certainly went to God and asked God for his help, and God helped him. His army wasn't too shabby. He had over 500,000 soldiers that he took with him to go and fight them. Well, anyhow, that was his background. Asa had seen God work before, so he was sort of open to the idea that God could do it again. So in verse 2, we're going to see the message that Azariah brings. He went out to meet Asa and said to him, listen to me, Asa, and all Judah and Benjamin. The Lord is with you when you are with him. If you seek him, he will be found by you. But if you forsake him, he will forsake you. So when do people stop seeking God? When, I don't think, most people don't wake up and say, today is a beautiful day to ignore God, to just totally put him out of my life. There's some people who do that consciously, but most of you aren't going to do that. And yet sometimes, all of a sudden, we realize we've drifted away, we're not seeking him anymore, we're not listening to his voice. When does that usually happen? Most of the time that happens when we think we can do this ourselves. Don't need God for this. I got this. I can handle this. And then we find that happens more and more and more, and we drift away. Azariah is saying to King Asa, you had a great battle there. God blessed you, but you need to remember that you have to follow God. And if you follow God, he will bless you. But if you reject him, he's going to bring destruction. And it's going to be very bad. The clear message that Azariah is bringing is that obedience brings blessing and disobedience brings defeat. So King Asa, what are you going to do with that? Here's some of the interesting things about Azariah is that he spoke with confidence. Did a good job. I mean, his life is threatened every time he goes to the king to tell him something that maybe the king doesn't want to know. And then he did not hesitate. God is willing to be found. Isn't that great? God is there. He's willing for us to come. If you mean business with God, God will mean business with you. And the third thing that we see in verses 3 to 6 is that he understood God's hand in history. Let me read verses 3 to 6 to you. For a long time, Israel was without the true God, without a priest to teach, and without the law. But in their distress, they turned to the Lord, the God of Israel, and sought him, and he was found by them. In those days, it was not safe to travel about, for all the inhabitants of the lands were in great turmoil. One nation was being crushed by another, and one city by another, because God was troubling them with every kind of distress. These were very, very dark times that Azariah is talking about. He's talking about the time period that if you were to read through the book of Judges, that's about where we're at. And he's trying to bring home some of the lessons from the book of Judges for him. Someone said those were the bad old days. Most of us don't like to think that way. There was, in that day, in the Judges, there were no spiritual leaders. They had judges. I wanted to make some comment about political leaders, but they didn't have the spiritual leaders to guide them. And they fell into a cycle. And this cycle becomes a cycle that Israel experiences very often. They're riding high, they're doing really good, and then they forsake God, and they leave him. And as a result of that, the enemies come down and oppress. And then as a result of that, they start to cry for help to God, and as a result of that, God rescues them. And that cycle goes on and on and on for Israel. They're doing well, they forsake God, the enemies oppress them, they cry for help, and then God rescues them. And then it starts all over again. They forsake God again, and it just keeps happening. In Judges chapter 17, we'll put these verses up. Thank you, Sid. She's doing a great job. What she's doing is not easy. So Judges 17:6 and 21:25. That's not a misprint, by the way. Judges 17:6 and 21 and 25 are exactly the same verses. And here's what they say. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. That's repeated twice in the book of Judges. No king. Priests were ineffective. There were judges, political leaders who were doing what they thought was right. And people were doing what was right in their own eyes. That's pretty sad. Azariah gave them hope. And we come to verse 7, and here's what it says. But as for you, be strong and do not give up, King Asa, for your work will be rewarded. Isn't that a great piece of hope? To know that what you're doing is going to be effective and going to be acknowledged and recognized by others. King Ahaz, you're going to stand firm for God, and if you're strong, God is going to see that, and he's going to bless you and make it right. Do what's right, you get rewarded. In the past, there was disobedience and there was judgment. But the neat thing is, even though there was rejection and disobedience, God was still there and still involved. It's never too late to start following God. It's a good reminder for fathers that, no matter where we've been at in the past, and mothers and kids, no matter what we've done in the past, it's never too late to start over and start to do what God wants us to do. Well, that message of hope to King Asa, that if he just did what was right, God's going to bless you, that was incredibly encouraging to him, and it electrified him and the people, and they decided to follow God. So then, in verse 8, it goes on to tell us that when Asa heard these words, and the prophecy of Ahaziah, son of Obed the prophet, he took courage. He removed the detestable idols from the whole land of Judah and Benjamin, and from the towns he had captured in the hills of Ephraim. He repaired the altar of the Lord that was in front of the portico of the Lord's temple. Asa had the courage and the heart for God to break the cycle. That's really significant. That's exactly what it takes. It takes courage and it takes a heart for God to break that cycle. So what he ended up doing was he attacked idolatry and he promoted worship. So he changed everything that was going on. He rededicated the temple and he celebrated the renewal of a covenant. Covenant of the Feast of Weeks that they had to celebrate Pentecost. So, what happens next after they get all excited? They're going to follow God. They're going to do this thing. It's going to be great. Verse 9 tells us there was growth. Then he assembled all Judah and Benjamin, and the people from Ephraim and Manasseh and Simeon, who had settled among them, for large numbers had come over to him from Israel when they saw that the Lord, his God, was with him. So here's what's happening. 10 tribes up north, they're doing their own things. They have another leader. In fact, I think at this point, it may have been Jehoshaphat was the leader of them now. And now in the south, here's Asa. And remember last week that when Rehoboam split things up, that some of the priests from the north decided to stay down south because they wanted to be at Jerusalem so they could keep practicing and worshiping. So there was a large contingent of people that didn't split off with the north. Now there's more and more people flocking down to them because they see what God is doing in the south, but they also saw the apathy of what was going on spiritually in the north. And then in verses 10 through 12, it tells how they worshiped one true God. They assembled at Jerusalem in the 3rd month of the 15th year of Asa's reign. And at that time they sacrificed to the Lord 700 head of cattle, 7,000 sheep and goats from the plunder that they had brought back. They entered into a covenant to seek the Lord, the God of their fathers, with all their heart and soul. All who would not seek the Lord, the God of Israel, were to be put to death, whether small or great, man or woman. Wow. They decided to worship God, and God sent a revival, and it was widespread. Israel was paying attention to what's going on down there. Judah and Benjamin getting right with God. But representatives, probably large representatives from Ephraim, Manasseh, and Simeon all decided we're going to go down and join this. God is doing some amazing things down there, and we want to be a part of that. That's what they saw, which is interesting because Simeon particularly is the one tribe that during the time of Judges you really don't hear anything about. But now all of a sudden they've got people that are going down and they're going to join, and they entered into King Asa and his people and all the followers entered into a covenant. Covenants are really interesting. Covenants, in my opinion, are the opposite of contracts. For instance, a covenant is based on trust. It has to do with the character of somebody, like a handshake is all you need. Covenant's based on trust, but a contract is based on mistrust. So if you're buying, let's say, a car from somebody, from one of the people around the corner that you don't know real well, you write up a contract. Because you don't know that after you pay $5,000 for that car, that when you turn the key on, that it's going to start. You don't know that. And you write in there the terms of the agreement, that the car is going to start, you put in how much mileage on it, and all kinds of things about it, because you need to know the more that you can, because it's based on mistrust. I don't know that I can trust you that this car will start, so I want you to sign your name on that. A covenant also has unlimited responsibility based on your character, based on trust in that relationship, that you have all kinds of responsibilities. It's just unlimited. You're going to fulfill your promises, where a contract is limited responsibilities. I guarantee that the car will start, but I won't guarantee that it'll last 10 years, or 5 years, or 10 days, or whatever you write it up. A covenant has limited responsibility, and a covenant can never be broken. It can never be broken, but a contract can be voided by either mutual consent or even one of the parties breaking it. A covenant is based on the character of the person, gives all kinds of responsibilities, and it's based on trust, and it cannot be broken. Oh, by the way, in our culture, the thing that you see the most about this in practice, I'm using a car illustration, but marriage is a covenant. And that's where we see it applied the most in our culture, where it's based on trust, unlimited responsibilities, never broken. Where a contract can be broken by either mutual consent. You see that in the sports world a lot, where somebody says, I want to be traded, and they say, well, we'll let you do that, and they agree mutually to go to the Lakers or whoever else they're going to go to. And then sometimes it's broken by one person. And there have been contracts that have been broken in sports where the person does something illegal and it severs him from his contract. They don't have to pay him anymore. All of that, Israel started and made a covenant together that they were going to worship God and worship God alone. And it's interesting, in verses 13 through 15, that's a really harsh thing. We saw it in verse 12, that when they entered the covenant to seek the Lord God of their fathers with all their heart and soul, all who would not seek the Lord, the God of Israel, were to be put to death, whether small or great, man or woman. They took on an oath to the Lord with loud acclamation, with shouting, with trumpets, and with horns. All Judah rejoiced about the oath because they had sworn it wholeheartedly. They sought God eagerly, and he was found by them. So the Lord gave them rest on every side. It was a very harsh agreement. If you don't enter into this covenant, whether you're a man or a woman, you are going to be put to death. That's pretty harsh. But I wrote in my notes, it's an interesting form of evangelism. But, God was very serious, and they were very serious. If you're King Asa, why would you do that? Why would you make it that strong? And the only thing I can imagine is he had saw the unbelievable, desperate decline of his nation, and how painful that is, and how eternally damaging that is, that he was not about to let anybody bring that on him again at that time. So I think that's what he was looking at. Verse 16 says, King Asa also deposed his, mine says, grandmother, Mecca, from her position as queen mother because she had made a repulsive Asherah pole. And Asa cut the pole down, broke it up, and burned it in the Kidron Valley, which is just on the other side of Orville. Actually, it's not. This person, it says, my translation says it's his grandmother. The word that was used could mean, a female descendant of some nature. I think the King James translated it mother. That's probably not right, but grandmother or someone farther back than that is who she was. And it says that she was the, what did it say? The queen mother, it says. That's interesting. The word there for queen is not the normal Hebrew word for a queen. And the only other time it's used in the Bible, and I don't get this, I don't know why, but it's used about Queen Sheba. And so it's basically saying that this woman had authority. She had a lot of authority and probably spiritual authority, and her spiritual authority had everything to do with worshiping a godless, dead idol. And she was leading people astray. So Asa disposes her. He didn't kill her. He just took away all of her authority. Rob really lucked out because I asked him to read from Proverbs chapter 4, verses 1 through 9. Here's what I originally was going to have him read on Father's Day. Do not suppose, this is Jesus, because it's in red. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. And anyone who loves his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves his son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. That would have been a tough read for you. I think people would have thrown things at Rob if we had him read that passage. What that's all about is Jesus is reminding us that, yes, you honor your parents. Of course you do. But the highest honor that we have should go to Christ, always. He should be the pinnacle of everything in our lives. Verse 17 says, although he did not remove the high places from Israel, remember, he wasn't over Israel. That's the 10 tribes up north. He didn't go in there and start wrecking their places. But Asa's heart was fully committed to the Lord all his life. He was blameless as far as his spiritual commitment to Christ and to God. He was very solid in that. Verse 18 says, he brought into the temple of God the silver and gold and the articles that he and his father had dedicated. He restocked the temple. Last week we mentioned that Shishak, the king of Egypt, when Rehoboam was on the throne, the king of Egypt comes in with his troops, and they come into Jerusalem, and they go into the temple, and they pull out all the gold stuff and all the rich treasures, and they take it, and they're laughing all the way as they go out, and Rehoboam doesn't do a thing about it, and the people are paralyzed, and they don't defend it or do anything. They just lost all their valuable stuff. And so Rehoboam does a really great thing now. He decides, well, I'm going to replace that and makes cheaper versions of everything. Well, here comes Asa saying, this is just not right. This is God's temple. We need to restock and rebuild everything. Verse 19 says, there was no more war until the 35th year of Asa's reign. Probably that's a better translation would be to the 35th year after it all split up, after Rehoboam did that. Asa still had his problems, but he turned to God and he led the people in the right way. In Proverbs 19, I think I've got another set of verses up there. It's the one said that starts with listen to advice and accept thank you. I would have told her the reference, but that would really throw her off because that didn't get changed, the reference. It's actually Proverbs 19, 20 and 21. It says, listen to advice and accept instruction, and in the end, you will be wise. Many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. It's always right to do what is right. Always right to do that. So I had in your bulletin a couple of phrases. One of them is, think and speak the truth. You should always think and speak the truth as much as possible. Listen and obey God, and then start strong and go the distance. And I think that's what Asa did. So when we started this summer series, I told you that there's going to be 3 questions that I think we can learn some stuff from all of these examples, and we'll see if they appear in each situation. The first question was this: did we see the consequences of sin? When you look at this chapter and Israel, can you see the consequences of sin? By the way, the answer is yes. Because of their sin, especially thinking about the time of the judges, it led them into horrible idolatry. Horrible idolatry. How does a nation that God visibly appears to turn away from him and go to wooden statues and bronze and things like that? And for a while, God set them aside. So yeah, there was sin and there was consequences. God just kind of let them go and do what they thought was right in their own eyes. By the way, if everybody did what was right in their own eyes, it would be absolute chaos. Absolute chaos. People would be killing each other, stealing from each other. Everybody just did whatever they wanted to do. The other question, did the prophets, elders, or leaders struggle and yet show courage? I thought Azariah showed amazing courage. I mean, I can't imagine it would be an easy thing to do, is to go in and tell the king that you and your people are a disaster, and you need to do something about it. That had to be a horrible assignment. And yet, I think King Asa showed wonderful boldness by accepting God's message, responding to God's message, and then acting upon God's message. And he went out and he wiped out all the false things, even to the extent that his own family was taken out of positions of prestige, and he was serious with what he did for God. So yeah, there was a struggle, but there was also courage. And then the last question I have is, was God faithful? And I'm going to say yes, because verse 19 tells us that there's an extended period of peace for the nation of Judah during the time of King Asa. So he responded and was blessed, and God brought peace for him, just like he does in our lives when we respond to God and we obey him, and he brings peace. It may not be perfect according to our standards, but he brings an amount of peace to our lives, a peace that will last throughout all eternity. Let's pray together. Father, how we thank you this day for your wonderful peace that comes to us through our Savior Jesus. Thank you for the great hope that we have in one who has paid for our sins and has proved that on the cross, proved it in an empty tomb, that has brought faith and hope for all of us. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for the many other tangible blessings that we have here in this life, such as people who love us, people who care and who are around us and who minister to us in many, many ways. Thank you for your gifts that you give so freely. May we in return give you the gift of our lives, our service for you, our dedication and our commitment to you. And we ask that to be glorifying to Jesus our Savior. In his name, amen.
We're going to finish up our Father's Day service speaking about our Father. And his arms are open wide. What a perfect example of just faithful and unconditional love. So if you would stand and join us.
guys?
Very well. How you doing now?
As good as you can do, I guess. I'll go down to Daryl Friday. He'll tell me how I'm doing.
Yeah. Until then, you just do what you can.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see.
That would be a good deal.
Yeah, so do I. I hope he doesn't tell me I can't drive for 6 months. That's the big thing.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, little boy. First one. You're not very young anymore.
So did you guys get rained out yesterday?
Yeah. I was underneath, so I didn't get really that rain. So, I didn't really see that.
We went the night before, so it was really nice. But I saw Heather and Jared kept putting postings up there, and I was hoping you guys get the game in with